Welcome to another edition of our personal empowerment audio program, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder, and our program today is about taking another step back. We often talk about taking a step back and seeing things from a higher perspective, from a higher consciousness, but even yet one more step back takes us to a place that we call the quantum view.
Quantum physics or quantum mechanics is the science, and we're going to talk initially about hard science, physics, empirical science. It's that part of science, that branch of science, that has to do with what Stephen Hawking calls the ultimate grittiness of the universe. In other words, the tiniest particles. When I was in school, that was electrons, that was atoms or molecules, electrons, protons, neutrons, but now we've gone to a subatomic level, and research is generating information about this, in some ways, really bizarre world of extremely small particles. That's the quantum element, and yet there's a whole branch of physics at work here we don't see in Newtonian physics or in the physics that Einstein talks about, large bodies, planets rotating around stars and such. It's almost as if there are two distinct fields of science, the physics we all learned about and this emerging quantum field about these teeny tiny little guys.
Well, basically, the whole thing didn't quite add up. I mean, Einstein tried to put it all together in this, theory of relativity, the theory of everything, the unified field theory is what he was trying to create, and he never could quite find it because there was some missing elements that he wasn't aware of. It worked for Newton on the level of, slower than the speed of light, and it even worked for Einstein on a level of faster than the speed of light, but it didn't quite put it all together. And what Stephen Hawking now is saying, and some of the most modern minds, is that what they were missing was that there's a lot of other stuff smaller than this that we aren't aware of, that we can't see, but we can detect its effect. We can know it's there because of the things it's doing. Hawking was talking about the basic concept is there's an infinite number of universes. It's a multiverse. And so from the moment all the stuff there was in the universe, which is mostly space, but all the gritty stuff you were talking about, it was all in one piece, and then if there was a big bang and it blew apart or somehow that stuff started going away from each other and creating all what we call these universes. Now, he talked about the idea of when that happened, every possible outcome of that happening happened in infinite ways. Now, there's a most probable outcome, and most of the time it happened that way. And then there's an unlikely outcome, and some of the time it happened that way. And there's a very improbable outcome, and once in a great while it happened that way. But he basically said it happened in every possible way, even though the most probable way happened most often. So in every event that happened since then, every possible outcome happened in every way, although, again, the most probable outcome happened most of the time. And that created this whole universe that we speak of now, bringing it down into creating galaxies and into solar systems and down into planets and then ultimately to this thing that we've evolved to, this Homo sapien thing, this thing where we are alive and have become aware of something beyond matter and beyond energy, where for the first time in human history, we become aware of this non-matter, non-energy thing called consciousness.
And that's the word, right? That's that middle element between the spiritual and the material, the middle element, the heart and soul of that is consciousness. We understand from Einstein that the physical universe, as far as that goes, is a universe of energy and matter, and that they're convertible, that they're two forms of the same thing, that we could say the material world, which is always in flux, it's very temporal, right? Impermanent, nothing lasts. Everything material rots or rusts or corrodes or dies or fades away. And
or as Paul Simon said, everything put together sooner or later falls apart.
It does. What goes up must come down.
There you go.
I mean, there's a certain entropy to it all, unwinding and degrading, but it flows back to energy and nothing is lost, of course. The energy, on the other hand, we have to see as infinite, as opposed to the finite nature of the material world. So Einstein put the equal sign between energy and mass, and metaphysically we call that spirit and matter. And what is the equal sign? What's between energy and mass? What's between spirit and matter? The fact is that this universe of energy and matter is conscious. At least we can accept that human beings are conscious and sentient and aware of ourselves. We can communicate. We can do remarkable things. We're also capable of rather bizarre and ugly and even evil things. And the animals, well, we don't know for sure. We can surmise certain things about how conscious an animal is or what it means for the animal to be conscious or aware. Plants, why not? Some would even argue that the mineral kingdom has to have its level of conscious awareness as well. Nothing like a plant, of course, much less an animal or a human, but could you consider the possibility that rocks and dirt and liquid and gases are conscious to some degree? Part of the one consciousness. I mean, ultimately, we're saying if there is one life, one thing at work here, one mind, that's one consciousness, but it seems to have many, many points of view. The one into many, like white light coming through a prism and separated into all these different colors. This one consciousness, this one life comes into form in such diverse and unique ways that I think it's worth pondering.
It is a most fascinating multiverse out there. The concept is that there are all these different dimensions that, we know of three of them really well, the three-dimensional world we live in, and then we understand a fourth dimension called time, which doesn't really exist in the three dimensions, but, the idea of a future, the idea of a past, at least our conscious mind is aware of those concepts. But to explain it all, to make the whole, what Hawking is calling the M theory, the theory of everything, the unified field theory basically all work, is that there are 7 more dimensions that are like smaller than us, smaller even than what we call microscopic, but they have to exist, and they're affected by gravity, and they're affected by magnetism, and they're affected by the weak and strong nuclear forces, and they have to exist for everything else to make sense. So we have this incredible multiverse, which we're living in one tick of an infinite number of them. And what it is there's stuff out there. There's mostly space, and then there's atoms out there. And then at some point, when light reflects off those atoms and the human eye picks up that light, it rearranges that space thing. It turns it upside down. It brings it into the brain. It interprets it, and it calls all that space thing with a few atoms in it, it calls that a chair. And it decides that's what you sit on. It's a chair. You sit on it. So before that, before we looked at it, before the observer effect, before we brought our consciousness to that bunch of space with the atoms, it was just a bunch of space with atoms. And if we didn't have eyes, we wouldn't see it. If we only smelled things, we wouldn't pick it up necessarily as a chair. But because we have this unique evolved sense called eyes, called vision, we perceive this light upside down, backwards, and inside out, and we reverse it all and make it into something that makes sense. So in that sense, we aren't creating our reality. Sure, the atoms and stuff is out there, but our perception is just about the same as reality because we're the one that made it a chair.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, that is reality. Consciousness is not only perception. Very good explanation here from Steve about the receptive nature of consciousness. But there's also a projection that goes with consciousness. This is often referred to as intention.
That's a pretty chair. That's a comfortable chair.
And I'm determined to sit in it or buy it.
Yes.
So a willpower, some people would call this. Volition is a word I've always liked. Feels fun to say. Volition sort of tumbles off the tongue. And this goes with the whole idea of personal responsibility, of course, which some people see politically. I always find that odd. And then there is the whole psychological and self-help personal development idea of personal responsibility, which I think is more to the point, really, at least what we're talking about here. A quality of self-reliance that liberates you, again, not so much in a political or economic sense, but liberates you at a heart level to be happier, to be more free, to have greatly improved relationships as you take ownership of your life and say, I am, in a receptive sense, conscious. I am aware that, life is pretty much how you look at it. And yet I also have an intention, and I can focus my attention on my intention to behave deliberately. There's that aspect of consciousness as well.
When we take responsibility for at least our participation in the creation of our reality, at least it's not all done to us. We have the ability to be a co-creator of it, and then we also have the ability to be completely in charge of our perception of it and the responses that we choose to do with that perception. But just feeling the power of knowing that I'm helping to manifest that thing, I'm helping to create that thing with my thoughts, to me, makes us take a step back and look at our thoughts. I mean, it's not like they're airy-fairy nothing things. Thoughts have impact. Thoughts are influential in the creation of reality. Thoughts manifest as our perceptions of how we see things and therefore how we experience things, therefore the reality we think we're living in. So we have to be a lot more careful with our thoughts, I guess is the point here. It's people who live much of their life in worry, much of their life in regret, remorse, in shame, and feeling guilt all the time. Those people are taking the lens of their life and creating a world that reflects from that concept. I mean, the world looks like a guilt-producing, shame-producing, terrible, horrible, ugly world to them because that's the reflection of the thoughts they're having. Now, it's true that those thoughts can create true chemical changes in the body, and it makes it harder and harder to not think those thoughts. I mean, it's not like, there's not other things, and there are people like your parents or your friends that are reinforcing those thoughts on you all the time, and it's not like you're totally powerful and nothing else is influencing you, but you do ultimately have some power, and you have to exercise it. And by focusing your energy on the negative stuff, on the worry and the shame and the guilt and stuff, you're just sort of tipping the boat in that direction. I mean, yeah, there are other forces at bay here, but you are influencing it to whatever extent you have to influence your world in the wrong direction. And again, we've said it so many times, but the purpose of people's negativity, they think, is to keep them safe. And what it does is create the mind to believing it's in danger, even though it's only imaginary. It feels quite real.
Where quantum mechanics, the physics of this tiny, beyond microscopic, as Steve said, subatomic world, the relationship of that to metaphysics is a relationship that, to a large extent, reinforces what ancient mystics have been saying about reality from time out of mind, from the very inception, that we live in a house of mirrors, that we tend to get it backwards, that when we believe that we are limited to a world of form that is all separated, everything is separated from everything else, and you have to reach out into that world and manipulate those forms, and in many ways, it's like changing the person you see in the mirror so that you don't have to change. The physical life that we lead, right down to the very forms we're talking about, the building that is your house, your car, the clothing that you put upon your body itself, this is certainly part of reality, but again, there's an energy component behind it. It's mostly empty space. 99.99999 out 12 places. That's how empty space is. Even lead and titanium, steel, the most compact of all minerals. Well, we're mostly space. It's the energy. It's the magnetic energy, if you will. There's other forms of energy, centrifugal energies and so on, that bound up together hold this matter like glue. Well, in the metaphysical world, the glue that holds things together is love. And love as consciousness has a magnetic nature. It has a attraction, like attracts like in the spiritual dimension, like repels in the physical, but that's a reflection of the spiritual, don't you see? In other words, when we talk about the universe being, according to metaphysics and quantum mechanics, a house of mirrors, understand that we're manipulating a world of effect and largely ignoring, or just discovering, maybe that's a better way to say it, the cause behind all of that appearance. The primal cause is consciousness, and certainly there's some sort of spiritual component behind that. Think of consciousness as the lens that focuses that raw spirit into a form that is then projected out, and we're looking at the reflection on the wall. Very much like going to a movie and ignoring the source over your shoulder behind you and looking at the reflection. Quantum mechanics says that's the physical world, a reflection of conscious awareness.
There's an experience I had recently that reminded me of a long time ago, where a cousin of mine and I went on a trip together, and we saw the big redwood trees on the California coast. And I got together with this cousin a few months back at a family reunion, and that subject of that trip, when we were like 10, 11 years old, came up. And he had reminded me that on that trip, the car broke down and had to go into the shop for a day, and we had to sit at a cheap motel for a day. And that's what he remembered about this trip, was that the hassle of the car breaking down and having to spend this day in the hotel. And I'm like, that totally didn't remember. I mean, I remembered it when he said it, but all I remembered was these incredible redwood trees and these car you drove right through the road. And for 40 years since then, I've been having a reality of this was a wonderful trip that I took, when I was a kid. And he's been living a reality for 40 years of, man, what a hassle that was, that bummer trip where the car. So if you don't think we create our reality, then what's that all about? What it's like, perception is the reality. I mean, yeah, we both took the same trip, and yes, we had one bad day and 5 good days, and for him, he had 40 years of the one bad day, and I've had 40 years of the 5 good days. So you can't tell me we don't create our reality. You can't tell me that perception isn't most of what it's all about. And you have the ability in the quantum world. I mean, take responsibility. See how you literally have the ability to co-create what happens out there. And by choosing to want to aim at the bullseye, co-create the things you want to create, that you have significant influence in doing that. Not that it's abracadabra and it happens just because you think it, but the most important thing to me has always been, if you're focusing on what you want to really, really want the most, then the ride there is the most enjoyable ride you could possibly have.
I suspect it's difficult for a mind or a brain that's designed to work in this physical world to somehow get itself around the concept of infinity. It's challenging to me. It just feels difficult in my body. Infinity, well, how big is infinity? And already I've taken it out of context, right? I'm trying to ascribe a finite limit to the unlimited so that I can know what beyond that must be. And I'm contradicting myself with the rhetoric. Most of us aren't really that skilled. We haven't been given the tools to use to think in infinite terms. And then when a quantum physicist like Stephen Hawking, the most respected scientist in the world today, comes along and says, well, let me tell you about infinity. There is an infinite number of infinities. It's like infinity multiplied by itself to the power of infinity. Right? Now reality begins to fold back on itself, and it's just too mind-boggling to comprehend. If instead of thinking of infinity as this big thing, bigger than big, all the way to the edge and then even more, we think of it as a tiny pinpoint, a little instant of existence right here, right now, and consider that infinity is always present in this instant, in this moment. Everything, every possibility is right here. No, you can't get your arms around it. No, it doesn't make any sense at all in the context of the 3 dimensions of space. So give that up. Think of it just as this breath, this in-breath, this out-breath, this feeling that I'm having right now in my body, or this experience of watching the sunlight come through that tree just there, just now. And the sound of this bird over there that I hadn't noticed till just now, and I'm listening to. Infinity is folded into that instant, just like eternity. We think of eternity like infinity is this giant basket of time that I can barely get my arms around. Instead, consider that eternity, like infinity, is this little pinpoint that's right here, right now. That's the reality. It's just, it has a pulse, right? It has a rhythm. It's changing. It's expanding and contracting. You can feel its heartbeat, but it's not going anyplace. Past is a memory. Future doesn't exist. That's timeline. Don't lay your idea of chronological time over the number line. That's the problem. That's where it looks like the past exists and the future is out there coming at us. You better anticipate it and you better worry about it. Trust time, trust infinity and eternity, and just sit in the moment. That's where the magic is. Through peace, feeling safe and relaxed, you can experience that infinite eternity, or shall I say that eternal infinity. It's what the quantum physics is saying about what metaphysics has described for a long time.
So what would it feel like to just kick back and think, I'm a lot more powerful than I thought I was. I mean, I have more to do with what reality is than I ever thought I did. And so knowing that, just being aware of the fact that my thoughts, my feelings, my perceptions are enormously more potent than I used to think they are. What am I going to do different? What are you going to do now that you know that the way you see things influences the things you see much more than you thought they did before? That the truth is, as science is now seeing it, it's just a bunch of atoms in a whole bunch of more space. And when light bounces off of it and it comes in and the mind turns it upside down and inside out and reverses it and it figures out it's something, we all figure out it's something different. Like, to me, that's a beautiful chair. To her, that's a hideous chair. To me, that's a comfortable chair. To her, that's a torturous chair. We all figure out something different about this thing that we perceive, and that makes it real, because to me, it really is a beautiful chair. It's not just a chair, it's a beautiful chair. And to her, it really is the ugliest chair she ever saw. I mean, that's a real, I have a visceral, I love that chair. She has a visceral, I hate that chair. I mean, this changes, marriages end over things like this. This is a powerful force, the way we perceive the exact same thing. So what we need to see is how powerful we are. And with that in mind, to me, the two significant things that I did with that was, number one, and I got the wording of this from Michael, but I replaced knee-jerk reactions with even-tempered, well-reasoned responses. I stopped just reacting, and I started taking a second or two at least to see my choices, and then sometimes more time to see even more choices. That was a huge shift for me. And the other was to let go of the fear of my ego needing to be right and defensiveness and, trying to prove my point and getting super logical in exchange for understanding that her feelings are more important than my logic and that we is more important than me, and that in relationship, that look before you leap, take that step back and see the bigger picture of how important the we thing is. That to me was a conscious step that I took that changed my life dramatically as well.
That's one of the things consciousness does, is create relationships. Again, this magnetic nature of consciousness is so important. For me anyway, the point where in my study of metaphysics, I realized that consciousness was a synonym for love. That love was much more than an emotional feeling or an emotional attraction. There is that, and that's sweet and intoxicating, quite a wonderful experience. But it's also a vulnerable love. We know broken hearts, and we know grief and loss, of course. And yet there's understood to be a higher love, a capital L love, if you will, that doesn't know any grief or loss, a higher heart that cannot be broken. Indeed, it's the broken emotional heart that allows for the growth and the expansion that can take us in the direction of this higher heart, this capital L love. Well, that is what religious people will call a soul and that is consciousness. To get that the soul is the consciousness, and that consciousness is spiritual love or divine love. Consciousness as love was a breakthrough for me. That's where it all made sense. Well, I know love is magnetic. I learned in all those personal development classes and all those therapy classes and lessons and meetings about taking responsibility for all of my feelings, that my love was mine and my hurt was mine, and the love I felt was my love. And I remember you teaching all love flows through your own love for you. I mean, the only love we can feel is our love. And the idea that love is a commodity that we exchange, again, a form that we can hand back and forth, is a faulty model. But when you think of it as a matrix, an organized field of electromagnetic energy, love as consciousness being magnetic, it makes a lot of sense. Now, that same attraction I feel for someone I love, or that repulsion I feel if there's not love but darkness there, that same kind of magnetism would exist then in consciousness. And now I understand the way in which I'm magnetizing these situations. You know, the law of attraction, they call it these days. It's cause and effect. It's you reap what you sow. Life is, or it certainly tends to be, a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if it's not apparent to some people, well, that's because everybody is co-creating. Everybody's expectations and beliefs are in the mix. There's a conventional wisdom. You know, all of our boats are floating on the same lake, so to speak. And so we are connected in that way. Maybe you don't see it as often as you'd like, but the more you look for it and the more you take responsibility for your life, the more free you'll be to live it a different way, to give up that victimization. So the idea that with your level of awareness, the values, the ethics, what you put your attention on, what you care about and what you love, you see, you put a charge on a certain frequency in your consciousness that is magnetic and will create, attract, magnetize the very circumstances and situations, the very objects and relationships that are necessary for you to play out this expectation. Wow! What magic is this? And then look back on not only what the quantum scientists are saying, but now look at the religious prophets. You'll have a whole new take on many of these concepts that you may have thought were religious, but you really find out the metaphysics that stands behind is allegory, a lot of what often feels like very rigid, crystallized religion.
So if consciousness is love, then the opposite of consciousness isn't unconsciousness, it's no consciousness. Because unconscious is an actual state. It's like the opposite of consciousness isn't a force, it isn't a power, it just is an absence of consciousness. Just like evil exists as the absence of good, or darkness exists as the absence of light, or cold exists as the absence of heat. It gets to the point, for example, you get to the point where you get absolute zero, you can't get any colder because there's no more heat to take out. You know, it's not like you can add more cold. Cold is not a force, it's not a real thing. Cold is only the absence of heat, and darkness is only the absence of light, and evil is only the absence of love, and that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You know, cold exists and evil exists, but in the quantum theory, it's just not having the love. Evil's not an inborn thing, it's not a genetic thing, but it can be easily taught by this torture thing we do, that we can pervert love in horrible ways, and you know, evil parents can create evil children, and it's not using the force, it's depriving the child or perverting the consciousness, the love force. We don't grow naturally into evil beings, but we do have the power to be incredibly influential in our lives. I mean, parents can be so influential, and gangs can be so influential that peer pressure can create evil. we have to take responsibility for the power we have over others to create good and bad in them as well. But understand, it's not a force. It's not natural in the universe. It's just something where we perverted the consciousness. We perverted this wonderful force of love. Love is natural. Love is normal. And if the filter that you're looking through, the screen that you take in when the light comes in bouncing off those atoms in that space, and it comes through this filter called, like, I love things, I love then you're going to look at that as a really wonderful, comfortable chair. And if you or that was a great time in the redwoods, and if you have this filter that says, I'm afraid, the world is dangerous, it's horrible out there, but don't let anything, then you're going to remember the time the car broke down and how ugly and terrible that chair is. And you create your reality through that love or lack of love filter.
That's a very good point. That makes love the way, the means, the via, the path, if you will, not the destination. Love is not a result of anything. It is the means to creating the out. It's love that heals, that transforms and uplifts. Love is the way we proceed, but it's not a destination. It's not a result. Happiness in the same way. We often set ourselves up to think that success will make me happy. Doesn't work that way. Happiness is a quality of love. Happiness is a way to move toward your successes. It's very important that you get that straight. If it's a quality of love, it's a quality of consciousness. It is the medium. And you don't want to blame the medium for the message. You ever heard these pundits on television or in some magazine putting down the internet, ridiculing the internet as if the internet is the content that's available through the internet, right? And so you find some pornography or some horrible, disgusting thing via the internet, by means of the internet, and that damned internet, that's just so corrupt, it's so evil, we're going to have to regulate the internet. Wait a minute, don't blame the internet for the content. Don't blame the tool for the way in which it's being used.
Don't blame television for those reality shows.
Which, of course, are not real. Boy, talking in a show about reality. The one thing you know about reality TV is how unreal it actually is.
You know, when it goes off the air because of a writer's strike, it can't be real.
Exactly. A hammer can be used to build or destroy. Don't blame the hammer. Right,
but if you see the world as you're a hammer, then everything looks like a nail.
That's what Maslow said. That's true. That's true. So we have a whole toolbox full of tools, but those tools are all qualities of love as consciousness. This is what it means to be a soul-infused persona. Is to be an individual who understands you have an ego and a personality, but that there is also available to you this higher self, this part of you that not only knows right from wrong, but assigns qualities to it. And this magnetic lift, this aspiration to be more. Steve, that Paul Simon line.
The thought that life could be better is woven indelibly into our hearts and our brains.
The Saggioli says, like the flower that turns toward the sun and stretches and reaches as if to know its source. Each of us has that longing, that magnetic nature of love and consciousness that pulls us likewise upward, except when the ego, fear-based as it is, grabs us, holds us. You call that being stuck, but it's really you holding on and sometimes even pulling you down, because ego's afraid of everything. Even spiritual growth frightens the ego.
So, my hit on it, and I don't know if this is right or not, but this is my hit, is that everything that exists now used to be a whole lot closer together than it is now. I mean, maybe even all one thing, and it's been moving apart, and it's been moving apart faster and faster and faster. And we've proven that. I mean, the farther away things are, the faster they're moving away from us. So, and most everything in the universe is moving away from us. Most everything. So it's all moving away now. Now, somehow that managed to create these galaxies, which created these solar systems, which created these planets, And somehow one of them happened to land in the happy spot, at least one of them that we call Earth. It's just the right distance away from the sun, and it's just the right temperature, and it's right the minerals, and somehow lightning hit all that stuff and made this thing called life, and it all evolved as it may have evolved a billion other times, an infinite number of other times in other universes, and an infinite number of times it didn't evolve in other universes. It's just every possible thing that could happen. And maybe we're in one of the highly probable categories, and it happened this way a whole bunch of times, or maybe we're one of those unlikely offshoots. Who knows? But all we know is the one thing we're seeing. I remember Richard Bach had a brilliant line. He said, it's like everything that happened in the past, everything's going to happen in the future. It's all like one movie, and it's like all in the film canister right here, but we can't see it in the film canister. We got to put it through a projector, one scene at a time. And so that's what time is looking at this whole thing that exists all at once and all kinds of, and we have to look at it one scene at a time. So I think that's what we're doing. And whether we like that next scene or whether that next scene leads us to a wanted or unwanted next scene after that, we have a tremendous amount of influence over with our thoughts and our feelings, and especially with our ability to step back, become aware of the fact that we aren't our thoughts or our feelings, but we are this consciousness, this awareness of the fact that we have thoughts and feelings. When we do that, then we become the real director, conductor, orchestrator, choreographer of the next perception and the next reality we experience.
We are pioneers of consciousness exploration. Each of us, I think, is an adventurer or a diplomat, a liaison that goes out into the physical world of unique experience where no one's gone before, like they used to say on Star Trek, to have the experience of being me in this space and this time. It's like the one life from many points of view. Now, let's take responsibility for our particular point of view. Quantum mechanics is telling us that the universe is cooperating in a physical sense at a subatomic level with our beliefs and expectations. Look, for 75 years, this has been called, again, not by esotericists, but empirical, hardcore physical scientists, the observer effect. And you won't see it watching large objects like planets or billiard balls on the table, or even at a molecular level. But when you get to the subatomic level, strange things begin to happen, and the beliefs and the expectations of experimenters cannot be separated from the outcomes. Chance is turned upside down, and while there still may be elements of chance involved, the impact of consciousness is indisputable. Now, this, again, is 75 years old. People don't talk about it because it's scary. It's like looking at UFOs or considering that there may be aliens. I don't mean from south of the border. I mean from other planets or other galaxies that are, or interdimensional time travelers. My God, you can scare yourself to death with this kind of fantasy and fascination. But in the most practical sense, again, as quantum physics reinforces metaphysics, we see the importance of where you place your attention, your attitude, the belief systems that you embrace and reinforce, your expectations, and your whole sense of where you fit into this world. Are you essentially a target or a victim? Okay, are you sure that's what you want to choose to focus on? Or are you one who consciously chooses how you respond to a situation, how you perceive it, and how you respond? And do that not just in your own best interest, but in the best interest of everybody concerned, seeking harmony, if not unity, and yet celebrating diversity, the unique point of view and responsibility that comes with it as a co-creator of our reality.
So it starts with you choosing your mood, your attitude, your way of looking at things, the filter through which you let the world come in. Because just with that, even before you actually have a thought about something, if you're in a good mood, your initial experience of it, your intuitive hit on it is a better one. If you're in a bad mood, your initial hit on it is a worse one. I mean, you're the first filter that it comes through influences it, and that is your general state of mind, your general mood, the way you're at. And This is not something that's imposed upon you. This is something that you either consciously choose or you're doing what you did last time. If you're whatever your habit is, that's what you'll continue to do unless you get conscious and say, I have a habit of being in a bad mood when I wake up in the morning. I'm going to choose to change that habit. Mood isn't imposed upon you. Mood is something you can choose to change. So that step changes your reality. That step, the rest of the day is different than it would have been if you'd stayed with that bad mood. Put yourself in a good mood. How do you put yourself in a good mood? Decide to. Make this conscious decision to. And then step back and experience yourself as having had a day where you were in a good mood. See the end, start with the end in mind. See the result you're looking to. Program your mind that this day, this one day at a time, I'm going to be in a wonderful mood, and everything that comes at me, I'm going to experience through this filter of love, and I'm going to start there. I'm going to start there because I know it's all just atoms and stuff, and I know it's all just light bouncing around and my eye turning it upside down and changing it into a perception thing. I know it's all that, so I can do what I want with that part of it. I can't turn that chair into a dragon, but I can make it into a nice chair instead of a bad chair. I can make it into a thank you for inviting me to sit down in this chair. I can do a lot of things with this chair in a positive way, or like I can do a lot of things with that vacation in a positive way, or I could do it in a negative way. It's my choice, but often it's not a choice you make. If you don't make a choice, well, that's the choice. You choose to do it the way you did it last time.
Camus said, life is the sum of the choices we make. And I always thought, wow, how nice and concise and powerful. And at first, sort of scary, right? Responsibility always is. Even a burden. Oh, no, don't make me responsible for that, too. Oh, I'm carrying such a heavy, back-breaking burden of no. Responsibility is what sets you free. It gives you the opportunity to choose what you're going to do, right? So it's in choice that we find our liberation. This is what liberty is really all about. The freedom, as Viktor Frankl talked about, the one liberty nobody can take away from you is your ability to think for yourself, to reflect on your thoughts and your feelings, and to celebrate your own personal integrity and honor your particularly unique point of view. Nobody can take that away. Or my rock and roll, but that's...
No, not a chance.
Let's do a quick audio journey.
Indeed, I think it's time to create our little internal world, with our quantum view. If you sort of imagine that in alpha, in paradise, in this place you create inside your mind, in the land of imagination, anything is possible, everything is possible, then if we lived in a world with it's kind of like a holodeck. Whatever we want to make happen, happens. I mean, in our imagination, we can actually create that world. In the real world, we can sort of do that too. Not completely, not as much as we can in our imaginations, but the more we practice in our imaginations, the better we get in manifesting our thoughts, our dreams, our ideas in the real world. So it always starts with taking a deep breath, filling the lungs, and holding at the peak. And as you release... let go of physical tension, let go of emotional anxiety, let go of mental confusion, and replace it with physical relaxation, a sense of calmness and clarity. As you move out of the world of wide awake into the world of narrow awake, in this place of paradise.
Imagine yourself floating on a cloud, and it feels so soft, yet clearly firm enough to support you safely. And the first thing you notice and enjoy about floating on this cloud is the willingness of the cloud to go whichever way the wind blows, without any sense of destination or need to control the direction. And maybe you can't live your life this way, but you could imagine it right now, just for a few minutes, how it feels to be that free, as a place to begin, at least. A process of understanding, to be that free, to allow life to have its way with you for just a few moments, and to see how you fare when you stop defending and pushing back and expecting more and more problems. Just give it up for a few moments and feel how free you can be.
So in this place of paradise, this imagination land, you have the ability to get very clear on all that's within your command. So what is it that you would like to create or manifest or make come true? Think of a dream, a vision, a goal that is born from inside of you and has within it the potential to help lots of others too. In fact, it's for the greatest good of all concerned that you move and do this thing for you. So what is it that you would like to begin to manifest or create? And in this powerful alpha state, you open up the gate of creativity and of conscious choice. You'll hear a powerful, positive, motivating voice that says, yes, you can. Take a next step and do what you need to do. And understand in this alpha state the power that's within you. In this quantum world where your perception is so influential, you must know that here in this alpha state, the power of that perception does grow. Because your mind is focused on nothing else, only this one thing, and with the power of the magnetic mind, through love, that thing you will bring. So what is it that's best for all concerned? What is it that you dream? What is it that would be best for you and every member of the team? Imagine it as if it's true, over and over again. Imagine it if it's you, and inside your mind you pretend, and then you pretend to make it true. And your thoughts influence the reality. It all starts with you.
Reality, so-called, is a perception of consciousness and a projection of consciousness. You could identify as a victim with either the perception or the projection. Our call is to suggest that you identify with the consciousness in the middle. For the secret is in the center, the magic is in the middle, at the neck of the hourglass, receptive to a clear conscious perception, and causative then to an even-tempered, well-reasoned projection, whether a response to a situation or seen as having initiated it out of whole cloth, something brand new and completely different that you choose to initiate. Be the conscious initiator. Standing at the crossroads of your receptive and causative nature, your perception and your projection, the consciousness that is open to infinite possibilities. It has the intention and volition to use it for the highest imaginable good.
So, if this quantum view is true, then you are much more powerful than you ever knew. So, what are you going to do? Just imagine that this is true, that you are in fact more powerful than you ever knew. And so ask yourself, what do I do? And that first step of going inside and looking for answers within, well, that's the first step in creativity. That's where you always begin. So come to paradise over and over again. Recognize how powerful you can be. Dream what you want into reality. And know that perception is a choice. And so choose to be surrounded by love. And with that feeling, such a healing feeling of being surrounded by love, bring your consciousness back to the room, the space that you occupy. Get in touch with your breathing, and now take a conscious deep breath. Fill your lungs. As it feels comfortable for you, open your eyes and bring yourself back to wide awake. From that special place of narrow awake, back to this place of wide awake.
This is a brand new year, 2011, a good time to turn around and look forward, to reconnoiter, to turn that leaf and start a new chapter. I think there's a lot to that. You have a lot of momentum in terms of the group consciousness of humanity using the new year in the same way at the same time. So surf that. It's a big wave, big tsunami of hope and expectation and belief. Just keep in mind that as important as willpower and intention is, you got to have the love, the consciousness. You got to have the faith. You got to believe. That's always, even in our mythology, one of the secrets to all of this. You got to have faith and believe. You got to have that focused passion, and that'll reinforce the energy of the goal, the belief, the will that you've invoked and initiated. Also reminding you that February 13th is coming up real quickly, just a few weeks away now as we move into this new year. It's the first Maui Mindfulness Retreat in Hiku, Maui, and we have some spots available, so why don't you check it out, focusedpassion.com. Click on the big colorful button that says Maui Retreat and dig in. Roll up your sleeves, some nice pictures there. A little gallery section. You can look around the land, 70 privately owned acres, right on the bluff, right on the shore. It'll just be us, just Steve and me and a few of our friends and associates helping us out, and you as participants in this Walden-like experience. I put this quote Steve and I talked about, what do we want to put at the very top of that web page about the Maui retreat, and we chose from Walden, Thoreau's line, I went there to live deliberately, or I went to the woods, actually, he says, to learn to live deliberately. That's a nice, concise definition of what it's going to be all about. The nature of mindfulness that you can take with you back to the mainland.
Yeah, it's anchoring paradise and bringing it home so you have it whenever you need it. It's a state of mind that you don't have to be in paradise to experience. Once you have it, once you've owned it. And, of course, that takes clearing out all the other stuff first. So that's what it's like a 5-day experience. You clear out all that stuff in the way. Love brings up everything unlike itself, all pushes out all the doubt, all the fear, all that negativity stuff. You have to take a day or so to get rid of that. At least temporarily, put it aside so that you can fill yourself with this incredible smell, taste, sound, touch, love feeling of paradise, and then have that so powerfully anchored inside your being that you can bring it up in the middle of a traffic jam or a snowstorm or wherever it is you need it.
Thanks for being with us, and as always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui.